January 18, 1945, 06:42 hours. Somewhere outside Houffalize, Belgium. The snow doesn't crunch anymore. It squeaks. That sharp, glassy sound only comes when the cold has gone past uncomfortable and crossed into dangerous. You can almost feel it biting through wool, through leather, through skin. A pale winter sun hangs low over the Ardennes forest, casting long blue shadows across churned-up earth and frozen ruts where tanks passed just days earlier. A disabled M4 Sherman sits crooked at the edge of a narrow road, its tracks half buried in ice and slush. The engine deck is open. Steam rises in thin, exhausted breaths. The smell hits first, burnt oil, hot metal, and antifreeze leaking into snow. Nearby, a small group of German prisoners of war stands under guard. They are tank men, you can tell by their posture, the way their eyes keep drifting back to the machine as if it were a wounded comrade. Feldgrau uniforms are stiff with frost, collars pulled high, helmets replaced by knit caps scavenged from somewhere, maybe abandoned, maybe taken from the dead. Their faces are hollow. Exhaustion has erased rank here. Among them is Unteroffizier Karl-Heinz Becker, formerly of the Panzerlehr Division, once the pride of Hitler's armored force. Becker watches silently, his breath fogging the air, as a group of American soldiers approaches the Sherman. They are not officers. They are not engineers. They are mechanics. No parade ground polish, no ceremony, just heavy parkas, grease-stained gloves, and faces that look far too calm for a battlefield this fresh. One of them spits into the snow and mutters something about frozen linkages. Another slams the engine deck shut, not gently, hard enough to make Becker flinch. The Americans circle the tank like men, assessing a broken tractor. Becker exchanges a glance with the prisoner beside him, a former driver. The look says everything. This tank is finished. The Sherman's right track has thrown a pin. The drive sprocket is misaligned. In Becker's world, that means recovery vehicle, workshop, spare parts, paperwork, hours, maybe days, if you're lucky. If you're not, the tank gets blown in place so the enemy can't capture it. That's how it worked in the Wehrmacht by 1945. Precision demanded perfection, and perfection took time Germany no longer had. One of the Americans, a stocky staff sergeant with a cigarette clenched between his teeth, kneels in the snow and peers under the hull. He doesn't curse, doesn't shout, just nods once. "All right," he says, "let's do it." Do what? Becker wonders. There is no crane, no recovery half-track, no neatly labeled tool cases. Instead, another GI jogs back down the road and returns dragging a length of thick rope. Someone else carries a sledgehammer. A third man brings a pry bar that looks like it's been used for everything except its intended purpose. Becker frowns. This is wrong. The staff sergeant, his name tape reads Murphy, barks short, efficient orders. The men move without discussion, like they've done this 100 times before. Maybe they have. They loop the rope around the track. They wedge the pry bar against frozen steel. Murphy raises the hammer. Clang! The sound echoes through the trees. Sharp, violent, wrong. Becker's jaw tightens. In German doctrine, tanks are machines of precision, tight tolerances, exact specifications, every part designed to fit one way, one correct way. You do not strike a panzer with a hammer unless you want to break it. Murphy swings again. Clang! Ice shakes loose from the suspension. A track link shifts, just a fraction. The Americans grin. They lean into it now, muscle and momentum, rope pulled tight, hammer strikes timed between shouted counts. Steam hisses as overheated metal meets sub-zero air. Becker feels something unfamiliar crawling up his spine. Not fear. Confusion. A younger German prisoner whispers, barely audible. Das ist Wahnsinn. This is madness. But the madness is working. The sprocket realigns, not perfectly, but enough. Enough is the American way. Murphy wipes his hands on his trousers and nods toward the driver's hatch. Start her up. The engine coughs once, twice, then roars. The sound rolls through the forest like a challenge. The Sherman lurches forward, tracks biting into snow, steel clanking back into place. It moves, not gracefully, not cleanly, but it moves. Becker stares. You can almost hear the thought forming in his head, heavy and unavoidable. We would have abandoned that tank. The Americans don't cheer, they don't celebrate, they don't even look impressed. For them, this is routine, another problem solved with whatever was on hand, another machine dragged back into the fight. As the Sherman grinds forward down the road, Murphy lights a fresh cigarette and finally notices the prisoners watching. He meets Becker's eyes. For just a second, there's something there, not arrogance, not cruelty. Certainty. And in that moment, standing in the frozen aftermath of the Battle of the Bulge, Becker realizes something far more terrifying than defeat. The Americans don't just have more tanks. They have a way of war that doesn't break when things go wrong. And this improvisation, this brutal flexibility, is something Germany can never manufacture fast enough. Behind the moving Sherman, another sound approaches. Engines lighter, faster. Becker turns his head. Down the same ruined road come Willie's MB Jeeps, bouncing effortlessly through ruts that would have swallowed German trucks whole. And the prisoners haven't seen anything yet. The Jeeps don't slow down. They shouldn't be moving this fast, not on a road like this. The surface is a frozen ruin, shell craters filled with ice, axle-deep mud locked solid overnight, the crushed remains of fences and wagons buried beneath snow. This road chewed up German transport for weeks. But the Willys MB Jeeps come anyway. They bounce, pitch, skid sideways, then recover, tires claw, suspensions flex. One Jeep fishtails briefly, the driver laughing as he corrects it with a sharp jerk of the wheel. Another splashes through a frozen stream without hesitation, water exploding into shards of ice against the grill. Karl-Heinz Becker watches, transfixed. He knows vehicles, knows engines, knows weight distribution and torque, and the quiet misery of a truck that won't start in sub-zero cold. He drove supply routes in Russia before he ever commanded a panzer crew. He remembers Opel Blitz trucks, overloaded, underpowered, sinking helplessly into mud while Soviet artillery zeroed in. And now this. One Jeep screeches to a halt beside the repaired Sherman. A lieutenant hops out, clipboard tucked under his arm, boots already caked in slush. He barely glances at the tank. Good, he asks. Murphy nods, good enough. That's it, no inspection, no formal sign-off. The lieutenant scribbles something and waves the Jeep forward. It takes off instantly, weaving past the Sherman and disappearing into the trees. Becker's throat tightens. Good enough. In the German army, nothing was ever good enough. Everything was regulated, authorized, approved. Even improvisation had rules, and by 1944, there were no parts left to improvise with. A prisoner near Becker speaks up in halting English. How long this repair? Murphy looks at him, puzzled. Repair. He gestures vaguely at the Sherman. 20 minutes, maybe. Why? The German doesn't answer. Because the truth would sound absurd. Because in Becker's world, a thrown track meant a recovery operation involving half a company if it happened at all. Because most of the time, it didn't. Becker remembers the bulge, not the maps or arrows, but the reality. Fuel shortages so severe tanks were abandoned with full ammunition racks. Orders to destroy vehicles simply because no tow trucks were left. Mechanics who knew exactly what was wrong and exactly why they couldn't fix it. He looks back at the Jeep convoy, now vanishing down the road. Those vehicles aren't just fast. They are everywhere. Another Jeep appears, then another. Radios crackle, drivers shout coordinates. Supplies move, not in grand convoys, but in constant motion, like blood through veins. One Jeep stops briefly to toss crates of .30 caliber ammunition to an infantry platoon sheltering in foxholes. Another drops off hot coffee in insulated containers. Another carries stretcher cases, wounded men bundled in blankets, faces gray but alive. Alive! Becker swallows. During the retreat from Normandy, he saw German wounded freeze to death waiting for ambulances that never came. He saw supply columns bombed into twisted wreckage because they were predictable, tied to roads, timetables, orders stamped weeks earlier. The Americans move like they expect chaos, like they built for it. One of the prisoners, a former Blitz driver named Otto Weiss, shakes his head slowly. "Our trucks," he mutters in German, "they would never make this." Becker doesn't answer because he knows Otto is right. The Opel Blitz was a good truck in 1939, on roads, in summer, with fuel. By 1944, it was a liability, too heavy, too fragile, too dependent on ideal conditions that no longer existed. And now, watching these jeeps dart through the Ardennes like insects that refuse to die, Becker feels something sink deep in his chest. This isn't just about machines. It's about philosophy. The Americans assume things will break, so they design everything to be fixed quickly, roughly, anywhere. They accept inefficiency in form to gain efficiency in war. Germany did the opposite. Perfection demanded ideal conditions, and war had destroyed all of them. Murphy and his men are already packing up. The rope goes back into a jeep. The hammer is tossed into the rear like a casual afterthought. No one cleans it. No one records serial numbers. Becker steps forward before he can stop himself. "Why are you not afraid to damage?" he asks, gesturing at the tank, the hammer. Murphy studies him for a moment. Snow drifts between them. "Because," he says finally, "it's already damaged." He shrugs. "Tank don't need to be perfect. It needs to fight." The words hit Becker harder than any artillery barrage. In the distance, the Sherman's engine note fades as it rejoins the column. Another tank rolls forward to take its place. Then another, a line of steel stretching down the road, backed by a swarm of jeeps, trucks, half-tracks, all moving, all supplied. Becker realizes something else now, something colder. This wasn't a lucky moment. This wasn't improvisation born of desperation. This was doctrine. A system that assumed loss, absorbed it, and kept moving. And if American mechanics could resurrect a tank with a hammer and a rope, what else could they afford to lose and replace without slowing down? Becker looks at the road ahead, at the endless motion, at the war still roaring westward. For the first time since his capture, he understands. Germany didn't just lose the Battle of the Bulge. They lost the war the moment flexibility became more valuable than perfection. And the Americans are already driving toward the next fight. The road bends west, disappearing into a wall of blackened pines. Becker keeps watching long after the last jeep vanishes. The guards don't rush the prisoners. No one shouts. The war, at least for this moment, has moved on without them. Snow drifts down again, light and deceptive, settling over fresh tracks that won't last an hour. It reminds Becker of something an instructor once told him at Panzer School in Wunstorf years ago. War is decided by engines long before it is decided by guns. At the time, it sounded like doctrine. Now it feels like prophecy. The prisoners are marched off the road toward a temporary holding area, canvas tents, hastily erected, heated by pot-bellied stoves that smoke and hiss. Even here, even now, the Americans are building something functional out of nothing. Inside one tent, Becker sits on an ammunition crate, hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee. Real coffee, strong, hot. He hasn't tasted anything like it in months. Across from him sits Sergeant First Class William Red Hargrove, a maintenance NCO from the 3rd Armored Division. Red's hands are nicked and scarred, permanently stained with oil. He notices Becker's stare and smirks. "You guys like our toys?" Red asks, not unkindly. Becker hesitates, then answers honestly, "We did not understand them." Red laughs once. Hell, half the time neither do we. But Becker knows that's not true. He leans forward. How many tanks you lose, he asks. Red considers the question, today or this week. Becker blinks. In the bulge, Red continues, we lost a lot. Mines, Panthers, breakdowns. Weather did more damage than the Krauts did, if I'm being honest. Becker nods grimly. That part is familiar. But, Red says, lifting a finger, we fixed more than we lost, and what we couldn't fix, we replaced. There it is. Replaced. Becker thinks of German factories under constant bombardment, of rail lines cut, of shortages stacked on shortages, of Tiger tanks sitting idle because a single specialized part hadn't arrived, of mechanics cannibalizing wrecks like scavengers. You must have many factories, Becker says quietly. Red snorts, buddy, you have no idea. He gestures vaguely west, as if America itself lies just beyond the tree line. Back home, there's a place called Detroit, and Cleveland, and Pittsburgh, and about 1,000 others. They don't stop, ever. Red pauses, his voice lowering. And even if they did, we planned for that. Planned. Becker feels the word settle like a weight. The German war economy was brilliant, but brittle. It relied on precision, specialization, and centralized control. When it worked, it was unmatched. When it broke, it shattered. The American system, Becker realizes, is messy by design, redundant. Wasteful on paper, unstoppable in practice. Red leans back. You see that hammer this morning, he asks. Becker nods. That hammer, from a toolbox I stole off a farmer in Louisiana during maneuvers in '42, Red says. Been with me ever since. Not army issue, don't care. He taps his temple. Army figured something out early. You don't fight wars with manuals. You fight them with people who know what matters. Becker thinks of German field manuals, thick, precise, beautiful. He thinks of officers punished for deviating from orders, even when deviation would have saved lives. Were you afraid, Becker asks suddenly, hitting the tank like that? Red's expression hardens, not with anger, but memory. Son, I've seen a Sherman burn with a crew inside because we waited for the right part. I ain't doing that again. Silence fills the tent. Outside, engines rumble. The war continues. Becker looks down at his coffee. Steam curls upward, vanishing. He realizes then that what he witnessed on the road wasn't an isolated trick. It was the visible edge of something vast, an industrial and logistical ocean crashing against Germany's shrinking shore. The Americans could lose tanks and still advance. Lose trucks and still supply. Lose men and still rotate units. Germany could not. That gap, the one Becker now sees with terrible clarity, cannot be closed with courage or skill or sacrifice. It requires time, resources, freedom to fail. Things Germany no longer has. A guard steps into the tent, POWs moving out. As Becker stands, Red offers a hand. Becker takes it, surprised by the grip, firm, practical, human. Good luck, Red says. Becker almost laughs. Outside, the column has already moved miles ahead. The road is empty again, save for tracks filling with snow. Becker understands now that the hammer and rope weren't symbols of desperation. They were symbols of confidence. And confidence like that doesn't come from faith in victory. It comes from knowing you can absorb loss and keep going. As the prisoners march away, Becker looks once more toward the west. He wonders how long Germany can hold out against an enemy who treats broken machines as temporary inconveniences, and war itself as a problem to be engineered around. The answer, he realizes, is already written, and it is closer than anyone in Berlin wants to admit.